Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. It was a wild weekend in sports. We had everything you could possibly want. We had a couple upsets, maybe a little underwhelming on the amount of upsets, but we had some. We had buzzer beaters, the first real buzzer beaters in multiple years. Crazy. Awesome weekend of college basketball that's just going to set up for an even better weekend next weekend when we get the Sweet 16. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about this tournament as a whole, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal that opens up today. A weird timing. We'll talk a lot about college basketball and some NFL as well. The Giants have found potentially their starting quarterback this year in Jameis Winston, but we'll get into all of that in a second. Before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic here today, and that's the question that I have heard far too often this weekend. Is this the worst March Madness ever? And we're going to start off with the simple answer, the short answer, no. It absolutely is not. Sure, it doesn't have those 13 seeds, those magical Cinderella moments that we've come to know in March Madness. That has coined the term March Madness as opposed to just the NCAA men's basketball championship. This is March Madness for a reason. We're used to seeing our FGCUs of 2013. We're used to seeing our FDUs of a couple years ago, those 16 seeds, those 15 seeds that go on runs. This year, there just weren't that many upsets. We had a couple teams, double-digit seeds move on. We had our one true upset in McNeese take down Clemson in the first round. But outside of them, you had Colorado State, who's played really good basketball through this tournament, gets eliminated by Maryland last night. They go out there. They were favored in that first round, right? You had an 11 seed go on. You had a 10 seed that's still alive. That's the lowest seed still available. This is the fewest amount of upsets since the Sweet 16 first began. That is how non-mad, or how mild, I should say, this March Madness has been, right? But that doesn't make it the worst March Madness ever. We have seen a lot of great moments. The athleticism put on display by a lot of these teams has been incredible. We got Coach Cal versus Coach Pitino, right? That doesn't happen too often. It was the fifth time they've ever met up in conference in the NCAA tournament. That was a great game to watch. These round of 32 games especially were amazing. We saw the 1 seeds really get tested outside of Duke against a really tough 8-9 field that went up against them. We saw Creighton put Auburn against the ropes a little bit. We saw Florida get pushed all the way to the buzzer by a team in UConn that had won 13 straight games. We saw a Gonzaga team that was heavily underseeded push Houston to the limit a little bit there at the end. These were all really good games against some really quality opponents. This is not the worst March Madness ever. And if you have people going out there and saying that this is the worst March Madness ever because we don't have that Cinderella moment, because we don't have that 14 seed, that 11 seed that makes a big run that we've kind of been accustomed to over the years, I say good. Look, the reason that March Madness is so special and the reason why we celebrate these underdogs so much is because it's hard to do. And when you take a look at the field, that was out there for this year's March Madness, it was the best top of the field that there has ever been in March Madness. You want to go off KenPom, FPI, whatever you want to do. This, by all of the advanced analytics, all of those metrics, was the most talented group of top 4 seeds that we have ever seen. Now, we still have a couple 6 seeds Ole Miss here. We've got a 5 seed in Michigan up in the top left corner of your bracket. We've got a 10 seed down in the bottom left corner of your bracket. We've got another 6 seed coming in BYU in the top right of your bracket, right? But that is just 4 teams out of 16 still alive that aren't your expected by the number teams. Your 1 through 4 seeds that should technically be here as long as no upsets happen. And again, upsets are a part of March Madness, but they aren't what make March Madness great. What makes March Madness great is the moments. And just because we're not seeing double-digit seeds that often advance here does not make this the worst March Madness ever. I've also seen people bring up the point that maybe NIL and the transfer portal killed March Madness. And we'll get all into the transfer portal later on in our show because it opened today, which is a massive mistake. It should, like football, be after the playoffs are done, and there isn't really even a real reason for college basketball here, but that's another argument I've heard. They're saying, oh, take a look at the FAU squad that made the Final Four just a couple years ago. Their top 3 scorers now on Michigan, a 5 seed that's in the Sweet 16, Florida, a 1 seed in the Sweet 16, and Arkansas, a 10 seed in the Sweet 16. That is something to point to. We all know this has been happening. This has been happening forever in the transfer portal, right? We knew that FBS teams or group of 5 teams or these mid-major conferences continue to get poached. Water will find its level, right? The same thing happened early on in a lot of these other college sports. Water will find its level in college basketball. There will be those Cinderellas again. People are saying there will never be another Cinderella run in college basketball, and that is being a prisoner of the moment. That is being stuck in what is happening right now when we see historically talented 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeded teams. When we see these juggernauts at the top of the sport that we just don't see every year. That is how talented this group is. This is a group that might go down in history as one of the most talented Sweet 16 groups we have ever seen, and maybe one of the more talented ones we will ever see. It is hard to get a group of teams, this many teams, this talented. And it's not because this is the worst March Madness ever. It's because this is actually setting up to be one of the best March Madnesses ever. One thing that makes March Madness so special, and one reason that I think last year didn't have a lot of juice really, was because the games weren't good a lot of times, right? You had UConn winning by 30 plus, and it just felt like they were going to win. You can't look at me with a straight face and say that you know who's going to win this tournament. Nobody does. Duke might look like the best team out there, but when you compare them to the other teams, they've had the easiest road to the Sweet 16. Obviously, you got the 16 seed first. Then they play the weakest 9 seed in Baylor. And I'm not saying Baylor was bad, but compared to the other 1 seeds, what they had to go through, UConn, Creighton, these teams that have made deep runs, Gonzaga, all of these teams that have made deep runs in recent tournament memory with very good coaches at the top, very good historic programs behind them. And when you compare that to Baylor, who, yes, won a national championship in the last 5 years, but that's not the same team. Don't be kidding yourself. That is not the same Baylor team that won that national championship. They are not on that same level as Gonzaga, as UConn, not even really as Creighton, although I think you might be able to make that argument with Creighton. But Duke has had the easiest path. So there isn't a team out there that I think is looking like they are the champion, which when you take that and the fact that this is one of the most talented groups of 16 teams that has ever made it to the Sweet 16 together, the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four, and the championship game should be a bloodbath, and we saw a little preview of that in the round of 32. So if you ask the question, is this the worst March Madness ever? The answer is absolutely not. And you just have to wait and be patient, and you're going to get some of the best basketball you've ever seen in March in a very long time. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Is this the worst March Madness ever? What do you think about this tournament having a lack of upsets? I know it's an interesting thing. It's something that we don't see too often, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to break down all of the massive moments from the round of 32, from buzzer beaters to upsets to great coaching matchups. We're going to talk about it all. That's coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over why this is not, in fact, the worst March Madness of all time and could end up being, in history, one of the best we've ever seen. In this segment, we turn our attention to the round of 32. All of the basketball this weekend was really good. There were a couple blowouts, but all in all, especially yesterday's games, there were a lot of great ones. We're going to go through the highlights for each and every single game, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit on the round of 32. This was one of the best round of 32s that I can remember in a long time. It came off the heels of what objectively was a disappointing round of 64. No doubt about that, but we covered plenty of that. Let's move on to the good. We're going to start off in the top left region for you. Auburn versus Creighton. This score didn't show the whole game, right? Auburn escapes 82-70, but Creighton was giving them a hard time. For a while in that game, it was close. Creighton was even winning for a while. They were hanging tough, especially in that first half, but Auburn turned it down the stretch. That's why they were the 1 seed. They were struggling heading into the tournament, but a game like that, after they were tested against Alabama State in the first round, might be able to get them going in a very important game in the Sweet 16. The game that they will be playing against, Michigan took care of business against Texas A&M. Texas A&M pulled ahead early, and it looked like Michigan didn't quite have the answers, but at the end of the day, the size and just the hot shooting took over. Michigan has 2 7-footers on their team, one of which we talked about, a portal addition from that FAU squad that ended up winning, or making it to the Final Four, winning their region. This is a Michigan team that has steamrolled, found a way to get hot at the right time, won the Big Ten tournament, a Big Ten tournament that has produced a lot of really talented teams still here in the NCAA tournament as we hit the round of 16. Michigan gets past a top contender in the SEC, shows why they're dangerous and why the hot team is always one you want to put a wager on. Ole Miss, Iowa State staying up in that region, heading to the bottom half there. Iowa State just did not have the firepower. Ole Miss had a hot shooting night. They had one of their best shooting nights of the tournament, of the year, really, against an Iowa State team that just didn't have their best player. And we knew that was going to catch up to them eventually. They were able to dispatch Lipscomb, absolutely destroying them, really. Again, size helps against those mid-major teams when you're a power conference team like Iowa State. But it just wasn't enough, and Ole Miss finds their way past a beaten and battered Iowa State squad to advance to the Sweet 16. Then you had Michigan State escaping a game with the Lobos in New Mexico. New Mexico, a 10 seed that showed a lot of fight. They were up early. Michigan State goes on a big run towards the end of the first half. They show out their physicality, their athleticism, and really their clutch shooting. They're not a team that's known to shoot very well, but they hit a couple threes when they needed to, and their defense stepped up. More importantly, they were able to shut down New Mexico, and they were able to have a massive comeback, advancing to the Sweet 16. Heading up to the top right side of the bracket, we saw Duke take care of Baylor. This was one of the easiest games of the round of 32 for any of the teams. We saw Duke just be the better team, really, and that's all it came down to. Duke was simply the better team on this night, and because of that, Baylor just didn't have any answers. Cooper Flagg, Colin Knippel, these two guys, along with everyone else on that Duke team, continue to be one of the favorites, if not the favorite, to win the tournament. They're playing like nobody else in the country right now. The final game of the round of 32 that nearly went into overtime, Oregon had a shot there. Arizona takes care of business. Caleb Love does his Caleb Love thing. He finishes the game 20-plus points. He is incredible. Caleb Love is a flamethrower. He's someone that Arizona their success a lot of times depends completely on whether he has a good day or a bad day. And if he has a good day against Duke, it could be very interesting in the Sweet 16. But he had a good day against Oregon. Now, Arizona was not playing their best basketball. Arizona was playing very undisciplined. They had a tech called against them when they were hanging on the rim trying to get a dunk. They had a couple fouls called against them late in the game that really they shouldn't have had happen. They needed to be more disciplined than that. But they were able to take care of business against Dana Altman and a very good Oregon team. This is a Duck squad that has been making very deep runs into the tournament these last couple of seasons. It just didn't happen. They ran into a hot shooting Caleb Love, and that was enough for them to escape in a 7-point victory. BYU took care of Wisconsin in a dramatic end of the game. A lot of people had issues with the refs in that one. BYU, the 6th seed, one of the lower seeds to advance. They go on. They beat Wisconsin by 2 points. They almost choked that one away. They were up big. Wisconsin came all the way back in that one. They had a shot. I felt like maybe they should have tried to move the ball a little bit. They still had some time. They had about 6 seconds when that final shot went up on the buzzer. Instead, BYU is the one advancing to the Sweet 16. They get an Alabama team, and those two teams can shoot the basketball like nobody else. That game should be a lot of fun. Wisconsin's run ends early. They were one of those 3 seeds that I thought could make a deep run, but unfortunately, BYU escapes. Unfortunately for them, BYU gets the job done, escapes with a victory. Then Alabama, they just outclassed St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a slow-paced team. Alabama is a team that wants to run the court, score quickly and in bunches, and it kind of got St. Mary's out of their game. They just weren't enough. Their offense wasn't enough to go after Alabama. And because of that, now you only have 4 conferences left. There's no Big East. It's just the SEC, it's just the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12 left in this tournament. You've got Houston and Purdue as we make our way to the next region of the bracket in the round of 32 that advanced. Purdue was the first game of the round of 32. They just dominated that one against the one Cinderella that advanced. Their size was too much for McNeese to handle. McNeese got into a little bit of foul trouble. They didn't have the hot shooting like they did in the first half against Clemson. And we saw what happened in the second half when Clemson really started to get in. They were just in too deep of a hole to come back. They make that, instead of an 18-point deficit at halftime, a 2-point deficit at the end of the game. McNeese just was not enough. Purdue figured it out. They had their bigs with that pick and roll. They couldn't do anything to stop them. Houston and Gonzaga in a very good game, one that could have been potentially set up for a game of the tournament. Houston escapes. Gonzaga had a great push at the end. Gonzaga, for the first time in 10 tournaments, will not advance to the Sweet 16. They had a tough draw being an 8-9 seed going up against Houston. That's been very good, especially defensively, but these two teams went at it, and Houston found their way through. Illinois, Kentucky. This was the game that busted the final perfect bracket. Illinois was the team that they had. Kentucky escapes. Now they move on to play their rival in Tennessee, who also took care of business against a UCLA team that just pounced all over Utah State, nearly doubling them up in the first round. That game should be a lot of fun. But heading over to the bottom left of the region, this one was the best one. And I'm not pulling any punches here. This had all of the best moments. From Florida escaping UConn looking like the better team. Dan Hurley being Dan Hurley, getting mad at the refs, because of course he did. It's Dan Hurley at the end of the game, walking down the tunnel, basically saying that the refs screwed them out of this one. Florida made this closer than it should have been. They could not hit a free throw to save their lives down the stretch of this game, and UConn took advantage of that. For a lot of this game, UConn felt like the better team. Florida, of course, is one of the more complete teams in basketball. Florida snaps a 13-game winning streak by UConn in the tournament. Of course, they were the two-time defending national champions. Dan Hurley's squad exits after a very successful season yet again. Again, much like Gonzaga, they just had a tough draw going up against a 1 seed and a very talented 1 seed at that. Florida escapes, but it's not necessarily an easy one, and it's not going to let their fans rest easy. Neither is the team they're facing. Both of these teams escape a tight one. This one went down to the buzzer. Maryland took care of business against Colorado State. Maryland, the 4 seed, hit the buzzer-beating shot. Derek Queen, clutch. One word to describe him. He went out there, asked for the ball, got it done when it mattered most for the state of Maryland. The Crab 5 advance, but this game was amazing. This was the first true buzzer beater, and what I mean by true buzzer beater is a buzzer beater that when the shot went through, it showed triple zeros on the clock. This was the first true buzzer beater since 2023 with Jalen Suggs' shot in the Final Four. Just the third one that has happened in the last 5 years. The last one that happened in the first 2 rounds, 2018. So we want to talk about buzzer beaters never happen. They don't ever happen. We think we inflate the number of buzzer beaters there are. This is a very, very special moment. And congrats to Maryland for making it to the next weekend. They should match up very nicely against Florida, and that game should be a lot of fun to watch. But then Texas Tech. They took care of business against Drake. Drake's just didn't have the offense. They kept it close for a little bit, but hot shooting from a Texas Tech squad, combined with their defense, just makes it real tough to beat them. In the final game, Arkansas, the 10 seed, the Cinderella of this tournament, although we can use Cinderella in air quotes for them because this is a John Calipari coach team, got past St. John's. St. John's, coached by Rick Pitino. We got a matchup of legendary coaches in this one. Coach Cal makes it out of this one. The real thing that sunk St. John's ship is the thing that we were worried about heading into the tournament, right? It was their shooting. They could not make a 3 to save their lives. They were 2 for 22 from three-point land. Their best player, R.J. Lewis, 3 for 17 from the floor. They needed to make a couple of those threes, and they couldn't get it done. Arkansas, big, physical enough to go up against and play with this St. John's team, and that St. John's team just couldn't get balls to fall. Unfortunately for them, they're out of the tournament. Arkansas moves on. Coach Cal makes it back to the Sweet 16 after not having very successful tournament runs the last couple times out with Kentucky. Now both him and Kentucky make it back to the Sweet 16. The Sweet 16 should be amazing. As I said in the first segment, there are lots of amazing games, rivalries, great matchups in the first couple of games. 1 seed should get tested. A couple of them could even go down. We're going to talk about each and every one coming up in the next segment here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the round of 32. Now we get to the good stuff. The Sweet 16 starts on Thursday. We are going to be going over a little preview of each and every game here in this segment. 8 games to go through, 8 of some of the best matchups you could possibly have expected when this bracket came out. We're going to get to that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our Sweet 16 preview, and we're going to go in order of when the games are going to start. So Thursday's games, we've got 4 really good ones. We're going to start off with BYU, Alabama. BYU versus Alabama, these are 2 of the teams that can just score points in bunches. These 2 teams don't have the greatest defenders, but both of these teams have some of the best offenses in the tournament. They play with extremely high pace. They're very good at shooting the basketball. It's just going to be who has a better shooting night at the end of the day. BYU versus Alabama is going to be a lot of fun, and there's a real chance for an upset. Both of these teams come in at 26-9 on the year. BYU has been really effective in that Big 12. They ran on a big run early in the middle of the season, taking out a lot of really strong contenders. Both of these teams over 35% from 3. BYU 37%, Alabama at 35%. These 2 teams, that is their strength. It's gonna really come down to, again, which just has the better hot shooting night. I think I lean towards Alabama as they're just a little bit more prolific when it comes to shooting the basketball, a little bit more prolific when it comes to defense as well. And I like their pace a little more. They're a team that when we broke down the historical trends as well, they were in that national championship conversation. So because of that, I'm leaning towards Alabama on this one. But BYU, don't be surprised. They should give them a pretty good run for their money. The next game on the schedule on Thursday, we see the 4-seeded Maryland Terrapins take on the number 1 seed Florida Gators. The Florida Gators are one of the more perfectly put together teams in this tournament. They're one of the more total teams that we have seen overall in a very long time, built similarly to that Baylor team that ended up winning the national championship back in 2021. But don't sleep on this Terrapins team. I know we saw them get into trouble against Colorado State, but Colorado State was playing their best basketball at the most important time. The key for both of these teams is going to be foul trouble, especially for Maryland. Maryland has one of the best starting lineups in all of football. In all of basketball, excuse me. Their crab five, right? Their crab five is what has carried them there. They've had some pretty bad luck. They've lost 8 games. 4 of those came off of buzzer beaters. So they got a little bit of revenge in their last game against Colorado State. Maybe they got the bad juju off there, but this is a Florida team that's no joke, and they survived a scare of their own in that game against UConn, winning by just 2 points against the 2-time defending national champions. This game, I truly think, is a 50-50. I like this Maryland team a lot. They haven't been playing their best basketball. They kind of fell behind, and if not for Colorado State going ice cold down the stretch, only scoring 2 points for 6.5 minutes near the end of that game, allowing Maryland to come all the way back in, they wouldn't have even had a shot at that one. They also make that tough shot after giving up the three-pointer for the lead. I'm taking the Gators in this one, but this is an incredibly close game, and I love this Maryland squad as well. I think the winner of this one goes on not just to the Final Four, but to the championship game against whoever's coming from the other side. The next game on the schedule after the Terrapins and the Gators, we have another 1-4 matchup, this one on the opposite side of the bracket as the number 1 seeded Duke Blue Devils take on the Arizona Wildcats. We kind of did a little bit of preview for this game when we were talking about what happened in the round of 32, but you have the Duke Blue Devils who are playing the best out of anybody in the entirety of college basketball right now. They are playing the best basketball out there. Amazing team basketball. They're blowing everybody out. They've had the most convincing wins so far. But they're running into a red-hot Arizona team, a team that turned it on down the stretch in the regular season, but also a team that was just red-hot, especially Caleb Love. And that's going to be the X factor in this game. If Caleb Love has a great game, this game could go either way. Now, even if he has a great game, Duke could still find a way to pull through. This is a very talented Duke team with Cooper Flagg, who was able to go toe-to-toe with the with the USA Olympic squad earlier this summer. He's probably gotten better playing against the college competition as well, so that's a little scary to think about, but Caleb Love can keep this close. If he has a bad game, Arizona is screwed. They don't have a single shot. The other thing with Arizona, they need to play more discipline. They were not very disciplined in that game last night. They need to be better. They need to play smarter basketball. If they're able to do those two things, have Caleb Love have a great day, a great shooting night, and they're able to stay disciplined, there's a real shot that we could be penciling in Arizona instead of Duke into the Elite Eight. In the final game for March 27th, Thursday, we see Arkansas, coached by Coach Cal, taking on Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are shooting the ball like nobody's business right now. That is their key. They are a three-point shooting team. That is how they win games. 37% from the three-point line. The Razorbacks, not too shabby themselves, 33%. But they, on average, make 3 less threes per game than the Red Raiders do. This game is going to be a bloodbath, really. We see the size of the Razorbacks and the physicality really came out against that St. John's team. That is why I think they might have an edge. I love this Texas Tech team, and I think they've got a real shot in this one, but if their shot gets cold here, they're not going to be able to out-physical and out-rebound this Razorbacks team. It's really going to come down to whether or not the Red Raiders have a good shooting night or not, and they've been shooting very well recently. Honestly, they have been. I'm leaning towards the Red Raiders in this one, but it's not the best matchup for Texas Tech heading into the Sweet 16, especially with an experienced coach, experienced players that have been there and done that before. This is not going to be an easy game. I'm taking the Red Raiders, though, in a tight one. On Friday, finishing out the Sweet 16, we've got 4 more games on the slate. Starting off the early game, Ole Miss versus Michigan State. This Michigan State team, this Tom Izzo team, is, you want to talk about physicality, one of the more physical teams in all of college basketball. They're going to be able to body you, win this game on the inside, but they do have a weakness. They're not very good at shooting the three. They're very similar to St. John's in that way, although I think they've got a little more just pure talent on that team. They don't shoot a lot of threes. St. John's, they do shoot a lot of threes sometimes. Michigan State doesn't do that. Michigan State, one of the teams that shoots the least amount of threes in the country, averaging just 19 threes per game right now, shooting at 31%. Ole Miss, that is how they win this game. They outshoot them. Again, I've said that for a lot of teams, but this is an Ole Miss squad coming out of the SEC that was a historically great conference this year, sending 14 teams to the NCAA tournament. This is a Michigan State team that I think might have the physicality to be able to move on, but Ole Miss is a pretty good matchup for Ole Miss as well. I think I'm riding with Michigan State just for this time, but it's not going to be an easy one. None of these games are necessarily going to be easy. Then we have a rivalry game, Kentucky versus Tennessee. Kentucky back in the Sweet 16 for the first time in a while. Tennessee has had a couple of tournament teams, 2 seeds, high seeds that have been a little disappointing as of late. They're looking to buck that trend, and this game is going to be one of the more important ones in that Tennessee-Kentucky rivalry that we have seen in a long time. Kentucky has swept them in the regular season. 2 wins against this Tennessee team that has only lost 7 games. That is almost 30% of their losses have come against this Kentucky squad. This is a very good Kentucky team, and they've done it twice before, but it's tough. It's really hard to win against a team 3 times. Tennessee, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it because, again, losing to a team twice in the regular season, that's just a bad omen. I want to pick Tennessee, but my heart says Kentucky in this one. With just the history earlier this season, I think they make it past, advance to the Elite 8. Then we have Michigan versus Auburn, and this is a 1 seed in Auburn that's probably been the weakest out of them. They've been tested in the 16 seed game. They were tested in the first half of the Creighton game as well. They need to come out strong. Michigan is a team that won't go away down the stretch. They're big, physical. They have 2 7-footers. Again, that is what has led them to where they are. They won the Big Ten tournament. They are red hot, the hottest team in basketball right now. Michigan is a very dangerous team. Auburn has the personnel to go at them, but the question is whether or not they're going to be able to play against a physical Michigan team. I like Auburn in this one, but again, this is not the greatest matchup for them. They don't quite have the size to match up with that Michigan team. And the last game of the Sweet 16, the 4-seed Purdue Boilermakers taking on the Houston Cougars. The Cougars over there in Houston, they have been wishing for a big moment in the postseason, right? They have been a 1 seed, a 2 seed for a long time. Purdue as well. They went on a deep run last year, making it all the way to the championship game. Wasn't enough. I think Houston is just too good this year. But that pick and roll action, again, Houston's defense always amazing, but that pick and roll action from Purdue, the passing of Braden Smith, point guard for the Purdue Boilermakers, it's going to make it really tough. All of these games I expect to be close. There might be 1 or 2 games that end up in blowouts, but for the vast majority of these games, I expect them to be deadlocked deep into the second half, and this is one of them. I think, towards the higher seed in Houston in this one after taking out Gonzaga. I don't think this is going to be as tough, but I do think it's not going to be easy at all. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who are your Elite 8 teams? Who do you think advances to the next round of March Madness? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we talk a little bit about the transfer portal. It opened up today. Why does it do that? Why is that an issue? Is it an issue? Is there a way to fix it? We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the round of 16, the Sweet 16, and a little bit of a preview. We'll go deeper dive later on this week, but just a quick look at where all the games stand right now. In this segment, we turn our attention to the transfer portal. One of the big controversies of this tournament centered around McNeese head coach Will Wade. Will Wade accepted a job at North Carolina State this year, and McNeese had a real chance to advance to the next round against Purdue, where the transfer portal would have opened up mid-tournament. It's got a lot of people talking, including me, and we'll get to that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit here on the transfer portal. Why does the transfer portal open now? It's a question that I think is a completely fair one to ask. We asked, I think, an unfair question in the first segment. Now we finish it out with a fair one. The transfer portal opens up in the middle of the postseason. Now, this is not a problem unique to the sport of college basketball. This is a problem that also extends to college football. The transfer portal for basically every sport in college has this issue. But college basketball is maybe the one that is the biggest abuser of this. College football at least has a little bit of a reason. This is, again, as much as we are here just to talk about the sports side of things, these are students, academics, right? Guys, players, people going to school, guys and girls going to school to get an education at the end of the day, right? Transferring not only makes you go to a new team, changes the dynamic of the team you're going to and the team that you're on, but it changes where you actually go to school, which I think is an underrated part of it, and it has to line up with the academic schedule. And the football one, it does. You line up with the start of the spring semester. You can't push it back too far because then you're just going to show up a week or two late to classes, and that's acceptable why they can't push it back. For basketball, though, it makes no sense. You are in the middle of the spring semester right now. If you push it back to the end of the tournament is going to end on April 7th. You put it on April 8th. That is a little bit, that's not even when the spring semester ends. You'll be able to get in if you were worried about the summer semester before the summer semester is over. So it doesn't make any sense why this is, at least academically, why it's now. And we look at the basketball court. How is this going to affect things? First of all, it could affect the play on the court. There's a lot of teams out there that like to build through the transfer portals. We're seeing lots of teams now that are built through the transfer portal. The Arkansas team, led by Coach Cal, built through the transfer portal. We're seeing the Michigan team built through the transfer portal, right? A lot of these great teams that are still alive right now are built primarily through the transfer portal. And this is not only going to hurt recruiting to them, but it might even hurt their play on the court. The coach's attention can't be divided between recruiting guys for next season and finishing out this season. First of all, it's not fair to the guys that are there right now. If you say, sorry guys, I need to go prepare for next season when you have a game against Duke coming up, right? Sorry guys, I have to prepare for next season when you have a game against Florida or Auburn or Houston or any of these 1 seeds coming up. It's not fair to these guys. They put their heart and soul on the line for this team, for this university, for you as a head coach. And you can, and I'm not saying any coaches are doing this, but they could turn around and say, I need to focus on getting ready for next year. Now, this has been a big topic of discussion, and most coaches are just going to bite the bullet and not have a good recruiting class this year, right? They're either going to make a deep run into the tournament now and not have all those great signings that they could have as all these top players enter and exit the transfer portal in this window, or they can make their team struggle a little bit more than they might have, or struggle at all when they wouldn't have, by not having them adequately prepared for their opponent in the next game and be ready for next season. And it puts these coaches in not a good position, because again, they should be all in on this season, but they're also all in on their job security. And coaching in any sport is very fickle. If you have a bad year, and sometimes not having a good portal class can lead to a bad year, you might not be in that position for too long. It's very, very important that these guys figure it out, and there is no reason, not a single reason, why you can't push it back. This hurts the sport of college basketball by having it in the middle. All of the attention should be on the tournament right now. It shouldn't be on, where are these players going? It shouldn't be on players opting out of the teams that are still in the tournament to go to new schools. We've already seen a couple examples of this, where players that are currently on their teams might not be able to finish out the run. Even if they are bench players, they're still a part of the culture of that team. They're gone now. That's going to change the way that these teams play. It's not good. College football, college basketball, just push it back. Wait till the postseason is over. It's not only hurting the players, it's hurting the fans, it's hurting the coaches, it's hurting everybody involved. There are no positives for having the portal open now. Just push it back 3 weeks. That's all I say. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the NCAA should do about the portal? Why do you think it's open now? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to football. It's been a lot of college basketball today for good reason, but there was one massive signing by the New York Giants as they continue to try and figure out their quarterback situation. Jameis Winston, the newest New York Giant. We'll talk about that coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over the transfer portal opening today, of all days in college basketball, a big mess that could only cause problems for the sport. In this segment, we turn our attention to football. We have talked a lot of basketball, but there was some quarterback news. And whenever there's quarterback news, we got to talk about it. The New York Giants potentially have found their starting quarterback for this season. Jameis Winston signs a 2-year, $8 million deal, up to $16 million in incentives. We'll talk about what that means for them, for the draft, for Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, everybody involved as this QB carousel and the domino effect continues to change. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit here on Jameis Winston. Like I said, a 2-year, $8 million deal. That is backup quarterback money. But Jameis Winston is a really interesting player. Of course, we know his famous 30-30 season. That's the kind of player he is. But Jameis Winston, I think, is someone that as a bridge quarterback could thrive on the Giants. This is not a signing that is meant to be long-term, right? This is a guy that clearly could just be a backup. They've brought back Tommy DeVito. He can be a backup, or they could run with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston really hasn't had a shot at being a starter since Tampa Bay, and that is with good reason. We had a little bit of an opportunity with the Browns. He did his Jameis thing, right? He has a couple games where he goes out there and plays like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and then he goes out there, and his next game, he throws 5 interceptions, which is what you're going to get with Jameis Winston. But the one thing that the Giants have struggled with a lot recently, and maybe this is coming from a fan point of view, but they just haven't been fun to watch. And if you have a team like the Giants, that's not going to be good. And I know this probably isn't the final option at quarterback for them because you have 2 guys on the hot seat that want to save their jobs in GM Joe Schoen and head coach Brian Daboll. But the New York Giants should be fun again. And arguably, Jameis Winston is the best quarterback that they've had in the last 5 years since Eli Manning retired, right? This is a huge piece of news because it kind of changes the trajectory, not just for the Giants, for the draft, whether or not they're going to take Shedeur Sanders at 3. They're not going to trade up anymore for number 1 for Cam Ward, most likely, although that one has kind of seemed out of the picture for a while, as the Titans, all the moves they're making kind of signal more towards taking Cam Ward rather than trading out of there and running it back with Will Levis for one more season. But this does shape a lot for the draft, right? If the Giants don't take Shedeur Sanders now, which there is a possibility they don't, maybe they instead take an offensive lineman like Will Campbell. Maybe instead they take Travis Hunter, cornerback, wide receiver. Maybe they take Abdul Carter if he falls to them at 3. But if Shedeur Sanders doesn't go 3 to the Giants now, and it's not necessarily a guarantee at this point that he goes number 3, where does he go? Does he fall all the way to the Steelers at number 21? Does he fall out of the first round? Does he fall to the Saints at number 9? There's lots of options out there for him, but there's a real chance that his draft stock, and again, pro day's coming up for him. It's going to be very important because he's kind of been all up in the air ever since the combine happened. He's kind of been up and down, out of the top 3, into the top 3, out of the first round, back into the first round at the tail end of it. It's a big mess with Shedeur Sanders. He's the biggest question mark in this draft right now just because he's a quarterback. And he's a talented quarterback, but he's a guy that probably isn't worth a first-round pick. But what this means more is in the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson thing. Because Aaron Rodgers wants to be a starter. And he probably won't have to compete too much with Jameis Winston. But this is kind of saying, hey, you're running out of time. The Steelers, I've heard after their meeting with Aaron Rodgers that reportedly went well, have put a soft cap on when he needs to make his decision, a soft deadline, a couple days before the draft, late April. So we've got another month of talking about Aaron Rodgers, but for Russell Wilson, this makes things a lot more interesting because the picture's sort of cleared up a little bit. Aaron Rodgers, most likely going to the Steelers. I would be shocked if he went anywhere else. But Russell Wilson now has a really interesting decision to make. Is he going to go to New York and play ahead of Jameis Winston, be there for a year, or does he want to go to the Browns? Whichever one he doesn't pick, I think will take Shedeur Sanders. And that's going to be the big question mark. Where does Russell Wilson go? Because all the talk has been surrounding Aaron Rodgers, probably for good reason, although those two quarterbacks at this point in their careers, a lot more similar than I think a lot of people want to admit. But Russell Wilson is maybe the biggest piece left to fall because the Browns still need a quarterback. They do, and he went and visited with them. He also visited with the Giants. It's going to be between one of those two in all likelihood. And now that the Giants have signed, a veteran backup in Jameis Winston or a veteran starter in Jameis Winston, I think there's a real shot that Russell Wilson goes to the Browns as a bridge quarterback and Shedeur Sanders lands with the New York Giants, which maybe doesn't change too much, but it definitely clears up the picture a whole lot, and we'll see what happens, because I think a Jameis-led season could be a lot of fun, but it's not necessarily something that's going to save Dable and Shane's job. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Jameis Winston going to the Giants? If they give him a full season, you think he could throw for 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, and 50 interceptions? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow talking about everything from around the world of sports. I'm sure more Aaron Rodgers updates. We'll talk a lot about baseball. The season kicks off on Thursday. We need to make it through every single team and do our season predictions. So a lot of baseball coming up this week. Be ready for that. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.